We cannot live in this world without interacting with one another, with your family, our friends, in school, in our work, and in everything that we are doing. We have to interact with one another. And every people we met have different beliefs, cultures, practices. Good day, everyone, and come with us as we dive to our topic for today, the multiculturalism. But first, I would like to tackle about the France's burqa ban, wherein merong law sa France na binaban or pinoprohibit yung pagsusuot ng mga damit na excessive yung pagtatakip sa mukha nila. Wherein ito nga ay commonly known as hijab or the burqa. And ang purpose daw nito is dahil sinasabi ng government na threat daw ito sa safety ng bansa wherein pwede nga naman na yung mga criminal or yung mga other people na may other intention sa bansa is pwedeng magsuot sila ng hijab or ng burqa, and in that way is hindi sila basta-basta makikilala. That's why sinasabi ng government na mahirap to or threat to sa identity ng mga tao doon. Eh, di ba alam naman natin that Islam or the Islamic religion is ito yung rules nila sa religion nila wherein yung pagsusuot ng hijab or nakatakip talaga dapat yung mga mukha nila na mata lang talaga yung dapat yung kita. Kaya nagkakaroon ng argument dito na nagtatalo yung government or yung policy ng government to the rules of religion, nag-overlap, and ayun yung isa sa mga dahilan kung bakit maraming mga argument when it comes sa politics and sa principles ng mga tao. So now, let's move on to the main definition of the multiculturalism. So, according to this, the term multiculturalism has gained wide currency in both academic and popular debate. And take note na ang multiculturalism daw ay hindi lang siya popular sa political science or sa political theory, but there are also multicultural perspective when it comes on social sciences, humanities, and even in the natural sciences. So, ang multiculturalism is makikita natin siya sa iba't ibang klase ng mga studies ng mga pag-aaral. We have here different concepts of multiculturalism. So first, I would like to tackle the multiculturalism as an attitude. So according to this, ang multiculturalism daw is nababatay sa kung paano ina-approach or kung paano nagre-respond ng mga tao sa iba't ibang culture ng mga tao sa paligid nila. So for example, even though you have different culture and traditions from other people, you tend to respect and you still want to understand them. So, it's really based on how you will respond, kung ano yung attitude ng isang tao towards the diversity, towards the differences of cultures, of practices of other people. Kaya naman, sinasabi dito that multiculturalism is an attitude. So next naman is the multiculturalism as a tool of public policy. So ang sinasabi lang naman dito is nakakatulong ang multiculturalism sa mga tao and even sa government para makapag-serve ng sense of respect and para magkaroon ng diversity and social cohesion sa isang bansa. So, next naman is the multiculturalism as an aspect of institutional design. Kung kanina, general yung aspect ng multiculturalism, dito naman is ang sinasakop lang nito, ang tinutukoy lang is yung pagkakaroon ng culture within an institution or a specific institution wherein ito yung mga values or mga practices na ine-embed ng mga tao inside the institution para magtuloy-tuloy yung identity and yung cultures nila. So the last concept is multiculturalism and moral justification. So according naman dito, ang multiculturalism daw ay may justify lang natin or magiging katanggap-tanggap lang if sinusupport niya or if nagbibigay siya ng dignity and na-affirm niya yung dignity and rights ng mga tao, especially the minority groups. Isa sa mga example nito is yung mga laws na nagbe-benefit or tumutukoy sa mga indigenous groups na kung saan nakakakuha sila ng mga benefits and mga advantages when it comes to work and sa school dahil sa culture na meron sila and dahil indigenous group sila. Let's move forward to culture, race, ethnicity, and religion. So, first is I would like to tackle the culture. Isang culture sa mga dahilan kung bakit nahihirapan na maintindihan or maipaliwanag ang multiculturalism dahil ang culture is hindi rin siya talaga literal na na-explain. Isa nga sa mga sumusuport dito is si William Licca wherein tinakal niya sa kanyang libro na Multicultural Citizenship na marami ang mga culture sa isang bansa. Merong 184 independent states na nagko-contain ng 600 living language groups and 5,000 ethnic groups. So yun pa lang masasabi na sa isang bansa is maraming iba't ibang mga cultures and practices. Kaya according to him, sobrang rare na makakita ka ng isang bansa na iisa lang din yung language na ginagamit nila, iisa lang din yung culture na pinagsasaluhan nila, and isa lang din yung practices na ginagawa nila sa araw-araw. So, yun, it just states na sobrang rare ng bansang ganun. Of course, there are different views about cultures, and first is the universalist view. According to Marxist, he argued na ang culture daw is nasa-shape siya ng material conditions like yung economy and yung class. And another one is si John Stuart Mill wherein na sinasabi naman niya ang mga tao raw have natural reasoning abilities pero yung mga ganitong klase ng abilities is na-develop lang kapag yung environment nila is sinusupport or ganito rin yung itinuturo sa kanila. Next naman is from a relativist view. First is si Ruth Benedict, wherein according to him, ang culture daw is maintained and it is an integrated pattern of intelligence. And nabanggit din niya yung pattern theory wherein it implies na ang cultural diversity is hindi totoo or walang cultural diversity sa isang bansa dahil naniniwala siya na ang society ay may iisa lang na culture, hindi raw ito madami. And we have Geertz. According to him, ang culture daw is a complex of signs. Meron daw tong iba't ibang symbols and meanings. Pero hindi naman niya sinasabi na hindi ito pwedeng maintindihan ng iba. Dahil if you want to understand it, you should put yourself into their shoe. Like, para mas maintindihan mo yung culture nila, you should see it on their perspective. Kung paano sila namumuhay and kung paano nila pinapamalas yung mga cultures nila. So now, let's move on to race and ethnicity. So, according to this, the critics of multiculturalism on the radical white nationalist right argue that multiculturalism is a Western ideology. So, ano nga ba yung Western ideology? So, ito is a kind of representation wherein kapag daw ang minority groups ay nilagay mo sa isang bansa wherein the majority is practicing a different belief or different culture from them, is hindi may influensyahan yung minority groups if they are expressing themselves, if they are showing their culture, and imbes na ma-influensyahan sila, itong minority group daw is gagawa ng paraan para mas mapanatili yung culture na meron sila within their group and within their institution. Like yung strong family ties, pwede example yun, mas paiigtingin nila, and yung ipapakalat pa nila, especially on their group and outside din, yung cultures and yung mga beliefs na meron sila. Isa nga sa mga supporters ng ideology na ito is si Kevin MacDonald, wherein ayun nga tinalakay din niya that multiculturalism really helps certain minority groups to survive and thrive even in a larger society by showing their cultural habits and strategies para protektahan pa nila yung identity and more on mapas pa nila yung genes nila even if they are living among a much bigger majority group. Next naman is si Richard Lewontin, wherein siya naman nakita niya that most genetic differences, about 85% or mataas, is nag-exist between individuals within the same racial or ethnic group. Or in Tagalog is mas mataas yung genetic differences ng mga tao na nagmumula sa iisang race or sa iisang ethnic group, while only about 15% of genetic differences are between people mula sa iba't ibang klase ng grupo. So So, ibig sabihin lang nito na yung mga tao na labeled as coming from the same race can be very genetically different, or kahit na galing sa isang race is pwede or napakataas ng tsansa na magkakaiba sila when it comes to their genes. While yung mga tao na galing sa iba't ibang races is mas malaki yung possibility na mas connected or mas pare-pareho yung mga genes na meron sila. So it's really not about the race, but it's about the genes and the variations that they have. Isa sa pinakasikat at pinakamaraming debate is about religion, on how religion and politics interact with one another. Kung anong haba yung nangyayari kapag ang different belief systems or ang mga different belief systems ay nagko-coexist with politics and the country. One notable person, Eric Sharp, identifies four modes of religion, kung saan dito raw natin ma-identify if a person is being religious. So first is the existential mode. According to him, it is focused on faith or yung pananampalataya or kung paano pinapamalas ng mga tao yung faith nila to God. Second is the intellectual mode. Dito naman is binibigyan priority ng mga tao yung beliefs and kung ano yung binibigyang paniniwala or kung ano yung pinagfo-focusan ng isang tao, kung ano yung binibigyan niya ng conscious assent. The institutional mode naman is the authoritative organization, wherein yung mga organization or yung mga religions, sila yung nagbibigay ng rules na nagbe-maintain ng kaayusan dun sa isang religion nila. And isa sa mga example nito is yung doctrine and kung paano ito napapasa from one generation to another. And lastly is the ethical mode, wherein ito naman is yung kadalasan na naranasan ng marami sa atin, wherein yung attitude ng isang tao is naaapektuhan sa kung paano siya makitungo sa mga tao with different religions. Kasi 'di ba kadalasan, isa sa mga example nga dito is yung kapag ang isang religion is sinabi nila na ay kami lang ang maliligtas. Kaya yung ibang religion is dinidiscriminate, pinagtatawanan, or nagkakaroon ng hindi magandang pagkakaunawaan between them kasi they also believe na mali sila yung maliligtas, but then the other one believes that they are the one na maliligtas. So, isa lang yun sa mga examples na ang religion really, it really affects how individuals from the religion and from outside have tension and stress as one another. Now, for the last topic of my part, it is the multiculturalism and Islamic radicalization. So, dito naman, since tapos na nga tayo na itackle yung culture, yung race, ethnicity, and religion, it is important na maintindihan natin yung mga yon para mas maintindihan natin yung sinasabi dito sa Islamic radicalization. So, first, ano nga ba yung Islamic radicalization? So, ito is yung pagkakaroon ng paniniwala ng mga Islam sa isang laws na meron inside the religion, kahit na yung rules na iyon or yung laws na meron sila is hindi nakaakma sa kung ano yung laws na meron yung bansa or yung nation natin. So, isa sa mga examples dito is kung paano ang mga Muslim ay allowed, or yung mga lalaki na Muslim is allowed sila na mag-asawa ng more than one, wherein yung law na iyon is applicable sa kanila pero hindi siya applicable sa ating bansa in general or outside the religion. So, ang sinasabi lang dito is that naaapektuhan ng religion talaga yung attitude ng isang tao and kung paano siya, and minsan is nakakalabag din ito talaga ng mga laws na meron ng ating bansa, or nakaka-epekto ito sa democratic values na meron tayo. But at the end of the day, we may not be able to fully understand what other people's beliefs are, but we should always put on our minds and on our hearts that respect should really, really be our top priority, because respect will always come a long way.
So for now, we are talking about the multiculturalism and identity politics. Multiculturalism refers to the coexistence of diverse cultures, ethnicity, religious, and also tradition within a society. So, dito ay pag-uusapan natin yung pagkakaroon ng pagkakaiba ng religion and also that tradition. And also politics of identity. Politics of identity focus on how individual and group define themselves and seek recognition based on cultural, ethnic, gender, or religious identities. So, multiculturalism have theories. So, the first one is liberal multiculturalism. So, the liberal multiculturalism emphasizes individual rights and freedom within other various cultural setting. So, dito napapasok yung pagkakaroon ng freedom ng bawat isa sa liberal culturalism. So, the next is communitarism. Highlights the importance of community and shared values in shaping individual identities. So, dito naman, papasok yung pagkakaroon ng community and shared values. So, yung pagkakaroon ng importanteng pag-shape or pagpapakita ng kung anong meron sa pagkakaiba-iba natin. So, the next is critical multiculturalism. Challenge structure, inequalities, and promote transformation of power relation between a group. So, dito ipapakita yung transition o yung develop nung pagkakaroon ng difference ng bawat isa. So, the next is post-colonial perspective. Ano ba yung post-colonial perspective? Examine how colonial history shaped cultural, rich, and modern identities. So, dito na papasok yung kung paano na-shape ng kultura natin or yung pagkakaroon ng adaptation dun sa sinauna at kung paano natin siya nakuha ngayon. So, also, multiculturalism as hybridity. Hybridity describes the blending and interaction of different cultures, leading to new dynamic. And also encourage creativity, cross-cultural dialogue, and mutual adaptation. Example, global youth cultures mixing local tradition with global media influence. So, dito naman sa hybridity, so dinidescribe niya yung pagkakaroon, yung pagbe-blend yung pagkakaroon ng interaction ng bawat isa. And also nakakatulong din to para ma-encourage yung kung ano yung meron yung bawat isa na ipapakita nila ng pagkakaiba. So, the next is the right of cultural membership. Recognize the individual identity is deeply rooted in cultural belonging. Support group differentiated rights to protect minority culture. And so, the next is constitutional diversity. Refers to the institutional recognition of culture and ethnic diversity in a nation constitutional framework. Example, federal or regional autonomy, the recognition of Quebec, and also language rights and religious protection in constitution. And also an overlapping consensus, a concept from philosopher John Rawls, applied to multiculturalism. John Rawls suggests that people with different moral, cultural, or religion beliefs can agree on shared political principle and also focus on shared communities rather than uniformity. The argument so far, multiculturalism acknowledges diverse as a social and moral asset, not a threat. Identity politics highlights the need for recognition, equality, and representation. Theories show various paths to manage diversity: liberal, communitarian, and critical. So, The true inclusion requires protect of cultural membership rights, institutional recognition of diversity, a shared overlapping conscious that binds diverse citizen together. So, ayun lang naman yung nilalaman ng multiculturalism. So, dun na yung pagkakaroon or yung ipapakita natin kung ano yung meron ng bawat isa. That's all. Thank you.
The relationship between multiculturalism and feminism is characterized by both ideological common ground and profound practical conflict, leading many feminists to question whether multiculturalism is ultimately detrimental to women's rights. So let's talk about the multiculturalism and feminism. So before outlining the objections, it is important to acknowledge three key parallels between the two ideologies. The first is the critique of liberalism and recognition of difference. Both stress the importance of recognizing difference and are critical of liberalism for advancing an empty, characterless conception of the human agent. The second is argument against essentialism. While both stress difference, many proponents in both camps argue against essentialism. They assert that women's experiences and cultural experiences are not homogeneous, and difference should not be defined in binary terms, them and us. Experience is considered heterogeneous. Then the third is the challenge to class-based politics. At the practical political level, feminism and multiculturalism pose the two main challenges to class-based politics, and thus to the traditional or classical ideologies of liberalism and socialism. So let's talk about the oppression. So despite these parallels, there are often shocking examples of the oppression of women in the name of culture, typically drawn from minority practices in Western societies. So first is as a permission, the practice should not be prohibited by law. Then the second is prohibited with a cultural defense. The practice is prohibited, but a person might raise a cultural defense in litigation in law. Then the third is a illegal and no cultural defense. The practice is illegal and cultural defense does not apply, but to a person would not be prosecuted for procuring the act abroad. Example is the forced marriage and female circumcision. Then the example of oppressive practices is polygyny. So polygyny is the right of a husband to have more than one wife is not mirrored by the right of women to have more than one husband. And the wives are often seriously materially disadvantaged, and many regard the practice of humiliating. So illegal in the context is ano siya sa illegal siya mostly sa Western societies, but a cultural defense may be applied. Then the second is enforced marriage. This practice directly contradicts the fundamental right to order one's private life by choosing one's own partner. It often involves the daughter being very young, to 12 or 13, and the prospective husband being much older, in his 20s or 30s. So in a forced marriage, the example of this is like in Mindanao. So meron doon mga bata na pinipilit ipakasal sa mga matatanda dahil nga sa tradition na meron sila. Then the next is female circumcision, genital mutilation or clitoridectomy. So this practice in 25 countries and affects 8 million women worldwide. It is illegal in every Western country, but women who send their daughters abroad for such an operation are often not persecuted. The next is the male violence. While it is a criminal offense for a man to inflict violence on his wife or children, there have been cases in several Western countries where the sentence passed has been less severe because the man used a cultural defense, particularly where the wife or daughter's behavior was perceived to bring dishonor unto the family. So, next is the access to resources. Immigrant women are sometimes discouraged from gaining access to the resources enjoyed by the majority culture. Example is one justification for making the acquisition of English a requirement of British citizenship is so that men can no longer prevent their wives from acquiring language skills. Next is segregation justified on the religious grounds. Religious grounds are exempt from certain kinds of anti-discrimination legislation. This exclusion is often extended to educational establishments, where girls are not educated in the same way as boys. Then lastly is yung dress. Ayun nga, example is yung the burqa. So the debate over whether Muslim girls should be allowed to wear the burqa in French schools incited. Some women argue that the state not permitting the dress provides girls with a degree of autonomy and protection from their families. Now let's talk about the feminist case against multiculturalism by Susan Okin. So feminism, the belief that women should not be disadvantaged by their sex, that they should be recognized as having human dignity equal to that of men, and that they should have the opportunity to live as fulfilling and as freely chosen lives in lives as men. So this excerpt provides the working definition of feminism and multiculturalism, especially the version that critiques liberalism, used by the philosopher Susan Okin. In her essay is Multiculturalism Bad for Women. So the definition of feminism provided of comprehensive and focusing on three foundational principles. First is the advantage. Second, the equal dignity, and third is for opportunity for a free life. So the first is of non-disadvantage, that women should not be disadvantaged by their sex, that targets systematic and cultural biases that place women at an inferior starting point or trajectory compared to men. Second is the equal dignity, that women must be recognized as having human dignity equal to that of men. This is a moral and ethical recognition of inherent worth, irrespective of gender. The lastly is the opportunity for a free life. Women should have the opportunity to live as fulfilling as freely chosen lives as men. And this is focuses on practical outcomes, ensuring women have the autonomy, resources, and social permission to pursue their goals without gender restriction. And then next is the multiculturalism as critic liberalism. The claim made on basically liberal democracies that minority cultures are not sufficiently protected by ensuring the individual rights of their members. Consequently, these cultures should also be protected through special group rights or privileges. So this definition of multiculturalism is distinct because it arises as a critique of standard liberal democracies. It defines multiculturalism not merely as celebrating diversity, but as political claim for special group protection. So the individual rights are insufficient. The core argument is that in liberal democracies, simply guaranteeing the uh, the individual rights of minority group members like ano po I like free speech, assembly, and due process. So this is not enough to sustain and protect their distinct cultures, and also need for group rights. Consequently, this culture require protection through special group rights or privileges. So then and next tayo. So the 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 first is the culture focus on the private sphere. The sphere of personal, sexual, and reproductive life functions as the central focus of most cultures. The first is cultural groups are often particularly concerned with family law issues such as divorce, child custody, family property, inheritance. This intense focus on the family and personal life has a differential impact on boys, men, and girls, women, typically granting greater power and privilege to men. So next, the second is the culture as patriarchy. So Hawking argues that many cultures, which he often equates with religious, have as one of their principal aims the male control of women, or patriarchy. She points to the founding myths of Greek and Roman antiquity, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, claiming they are rife with attempts to justify the control and subordination of women. Next is these myths employ a combination of justifications for female subordination, including denials of women's role in reproduction, appropriation by men of the power to reproduce themselves, characterizations of women as overly emotional, untrustworthy, evil, or sexually dangerous. Next is the refusals to acknowledge mothers' right over the dispositions of their children. So this is the responses to Hawking. Hawking's critique of multiculturalism generated a significant debate, and responses to her essay are contained in the book of Multiculturalism Bad for Women. Hawking's essay is the first in the book. Below, we explore the most interesting of the responses to Hawking from that book. We are not necessarily endorsing all of these counter-arguments. Rather, our aim is to stimulate debate. So regarding this, Susan Hawkins' essay, "Is Multiculturalism Bad for Women?" generated significant debate. The following points represent key counter-arguments and refinements of to her critique, primarily drawn from the subsequent responses in the book of the same name. These arguments aims to stimulate debate by challenging Hawkins' methodology, context sensitivity, and underlying assumptions. So the first is context and the cultural defense, Sharia and intent. The first line of response addresses Hawkins' use of criminal cases where men appeal to a cultural defense for acts like spousal murder. Critics argue that Hawkins is insensitive to the context of these practices. So, in the authenticity of the defense, as argued by Catapolit, it is necessary to question whether the man is truly reflecting an authorized cultural practice. Is honor killing permitted as a legal right in the culture of origin? Misapplication of Sharia. If Sharia law is the basis for the cultural defense, the alleged right of a husband to kill his wife is invalid. Sharia law is grounded in the principle of equivalence and requires court authorization for any sentence, along with a high level of proof. So, the murder in these instances is not a legitimate cultural act because the necessary background, legal and religious structure is absent. Multiculturalists therefore are not committed to defending the husband in such a case, contrary to Hawkins' implications. Then next is first is the valid and invalid cultural defenses. If we are studying minority cultural practices, then it is important that we are sensitive to the context, and this can work both for and against Hawkins, although in both cases she can be criticized for being insensitive to context. As Catapult argues, if a man murders his wife because he believes she has been unfaithful and then appeals to his culture as mitigation, we can reasonably ask the question, is he telling the truth? Are men allowed to do this back home? So next is the source material. Related to the last point, Hawkins calls her examples from criminal cases in the United States. As Homi Bhabha argues, this distorts the cultural context because cultural information is being used for very specific ends. Then the third is multiculturalism bad for women. There are two approaches to the relationship between gender and culture. You could argue that culture is specifically bad for women, and not just quantitatively, but quality, qualitatively. That is, culture is gendered, or you could maintain that culture is bad for everyone. The second argument might seem a bizarre defense of multiculturalism, but it could be used in order to move to a more sophisticated idea of the relationship between culture and gender. The fourth is Western woman. Hawkins contrasts the imperfect but basically sound attitude to gender among the liberal mainstream with a deeply patriarchal attitude to women in most non-Western societies. Then lastly is the experience. Hawkins makes some rather patronizing remarks about older women. She argues, quite rightly, that cultural recognition gives powerful to certain people, usually older men, and that intercultural communication should involve asking women what they think, but she then says that it should be younger women, because older women often are co-opted into reinforcing gender inequality. And for the conclusion, head skirts and women's rights. The first is agency and identity. Multiculturalist theory acknowledges the liberal conception of human agent as one capable of shaping their identity, but criticizes liberalism for offering an empty or a cultural concepting of human agents. So the burqa or hard headscarf represents the outdated sign is not only for of Muslim identity but also specifically gendered Muslim identity. In choosing to wear it or being compelled to, a woman distinguishes herself as a woman from other women. The underlying philosophical tension lies in whether this identity markers promotes an improved model of human identity rooted in cultural or reinforces gender inequality as discussed in the context of cultural and gender. Next is B is the culture versus rationality. So the conflict between culture, something inherited and taken for granted, and reason, conscious evaluation and criticism is central to the debate, since liberalism stresses a rationalist approach to politics. It is often perceived as hostile to culture. A significant portion of multiculturalist work is dedicated to reconciling culture and reason. Thinkers like Tully Rose and Kim Lika place the process of reasoning about just institution at the core of their defense of multiculturalism. The French ban on the burqa or similar religious symbols in schools is defended by the grounds that French state is providing Muslim women with a space to make autonomous judgments about their religious identity and beliefs. The next is freedom. While liberals tend to discuss freedom in abstract terms, sample is characters of fundamental freedoms. Multiculturalists advocate for contextualizing freedom. Then lastly is yung different and equality. Both feminism and multiculturalism have forced liberals to fundamentally re-evaluate their idea of equality. So this is the liberalism traditionally holds that human beings are morally equal, which translates into certain forms of political and limited material equality. And of course, the challenge is integrating moral equality with actual differences, the gender and culture into political principles and institutions. And the debate over the headscarf is a prime example of this. So yung yung burka nga is yung one of the example of this kasi dahil nga dun sa mga women na kailangan magsuot ng headscarf dahil nga dun sa tradition na meron sila. And that's it. Thank you and keep safe.